The world of A Song of Ice and Fire is much more than just a struggle for a single throne. While the television shows often focus on the political maneuvering of great houses, the lore created by George R.R. Martin is a vast mosaic of different peoples, cultures, and biological species. To truly understand why the world of Westeros and Essos looks the way it does, we have to look back thousands of years at the various races that have fought, migrated, and died out. The dawn of Westeros. Before the first human ever set foot on the continent of Westeros, the land belonged to two primary non-human races. These were the children of the forest and the giants. The children of the forest are often described in the show as small, wood-like people, but the books provide a much more detailed and alien description. They were not human. They were small in stature, rarely growing taller than a human child, and they had nut-brown skin dappled like a deer. One of the most striking things about them was their hands, which only had 3 fingers and a thumb, ending in sharp black claws instead of nails. Their eyes were large and golden, like a cat, with vertical pupils that allowed them to see in the dark of the deep woods. They lived for centuries and possessed a deep connection to the magic of the earth, which they called the True Tongue. Living alongside the children were the giants. In the Game of Thrones show, we see them as massive, human-like figures, but in the books they are much more beastly. They stand between 10 and 14 feet tall and are covered in a thick coat of shaggy fur that gets even denser below the waist. They didn't use much technology, preferring to wrap themselves in animal skins or just rely on their fur. Interestingly, the giants and the children of the forest had a somewhat peaceful coexistence, though they were very different. The giants were a dying race even before the humans arrived, with no kings and no lords, living in the high mountains and the cold tundra. The coming of the first men. Everything changed about 12,000 years ago when the first race of humans, known as the First Men, crossed into Westeros from Essos. They didn't come by ship, they walked across a land bridge known as the Arm of Dawn. These were Bronze Age people. They brought with them bronze swords, large leather shields, and most importantly, horses. This was the first time the children of the forest had ever seen a horse, and it terrified them. The First Men were not a single unified nation, but they shared a common culture. They were taller and stronger than the children, and they began to clear the forests to build their farms and villages. This led to a devastating war that lasted for centuries. The children of the forest used their magic to shatter the land bridge, creating the broken Arm of Dawn and the stepstones, but it was too late. The humans were already there, and their numbers were too great. Eventually, the two races signed a peace treaty known as the Pact on the Isle of Faces. The First Men took the open lands, while the children kept the deep forests. Over time, the First Men even abandoned their own gods to worship the nameless gods of the children, which we now know as the Old Gods of the North. The mystery of the others. During the period known as the Long Night, which occurred roughly 8,000 years ago, a new race emerged from the furthest reaches of the north. These are the others, though the show calls them the White Walkers. It is important to distinguish between the two versions. In the show, they are portrayed as ice zombies created by the children of the forest. In the books, they are described as something far more elegant and terrifying. They are she-like, beautiful in a cold, unnatural way, with flesh as pale as milk and eyes that burn like blue stars. They wear armor that shifts color with every step, camouflaging them against the snow, and they carry blades made of thin, translucent crystal that can shatter steel with a single touch. They don't speak a human language. Instead, their voices sound like the cracking of ice on a frozen lake. Along with them come the Whites, which are not a race but the reanimated corpses of the humans and animals they kill. The others nearly wiped out all life in Westeros until they were defeated at the Battle for the Dawn, and the wall was built to keep them out. The wall itself is a massive statistic of history, standing 700 feet tall and stretching 300 miles across the continent. The Andal invasion. About 6,000 to 4,000 years ago, a second wave of humans arrived in Westeros. These were the Andals. They came from a region in Essos called Andalos, and they were fundamentally different from the First Men. While the First Men used bronze, the Andals were an Iron Age people. They brought steel weapons and heavy chainmail, which gave them a massive military advantage. The Andals were also religious crusaders. They followed the faith of the Seven and carried shields painted with the seven-pointed star. They viewed the children of the forest as demons and the weirwood trees as idols of false gods. Everywhere the Andals went, they burned the sacred groves and slaughtered the remaining children. They conquered almost all of Westeros, except for the north, where the First Men managed to hold the line at the neck. This is why the north still follows the old gods today, while the rest of the south follows the Seven. The Andals also brought the first true writing system to the continent, replacing the rough runes used by the First Men. The Rhoynar and the Princess Nymeria. The last major human migration to Westeros happened only 1,000 years ago. These were the Rhoynar, a race of people who lived along the great river Rhoyne in Essos. They were a highly advanced civilization known for their beautiful cities and their mastery of water magic. However, they ran into a conflict with the rising power of the Valyrian freehold. After a series of brutal wars, where the Valyrians used dragons to evaporate the Rhoynar armies, Princess Nymeria led the survivors away in a fleet of 10,000 ships. They eventually landed in Dorne, the southernmost kingdom of Westeros. The Rhoynar were quite different from the Andals and First Men. They had olive skin, dark hair, and more liberal social customs. For example, they believed that the eldest child should inherit their parents' lands, regardless of whether that child was a boy or a girl. When they merged with the local Dornish houses, they created a unique culture that persists to this day. This is why the rulers of Dorne call themselves princes and princesses rather than kings and queens. The blood of Old Valyria. Perhaps the most famous race in the history of this universe is the Valyrians. They were a people from the Valyrian Peninsula in Essos who discovered dragons living in a chain of volcanoes called the 14 Fires. The Valyrians were famous for their ethereal beauty, typically having hair as white as silver or gold and eyes in various shades of purple, ranging from lilac to deep violet. They weren't just a different ethnicity, they were a race that had practiced blood magic and incest for thousands of years to keep their dragon blood pure. They believed they were superior to all other humans, and for 5,000 years, they proved it by conquering most of the known world. At the height of their power, they ruled an empire that stretched across most of Essos. However, their civilization was destroyed in a single day during an event called the Doom of Valyria, where all the volcanoes erupted at once. The only dragon-riding family to survive were the Targaryens, who had moved to Dragonstone years earlier. The ancient enemies of the Ghiscari. Before the Valyrians rose to power, the dominant force in Essos was the old empire of Guise. The Ghiscari were a race of people with amber skin and wiry, red and black hair. They built a massive civilization based on slavery and protected by disciplined legions of lockstep soldiers. Their symbol was the harpy, and they built giant brick pyramids that still stand in cities like Meereen and Astapa. Ghiscari fought 5 great wars against the Valyrians. In each war, the Valyrians won because the Ghiscari had no defense against dragons. By the end of the 5th war, the Valyrians were so tired of the Ghiscari that they burned the city of Old Guise to the ground and sowed the earth with salt so nothing could ever grow there again. While the empire is gone, the descendants of the Ghiscari still live in Slavers Bay, though they have lost much of their original culture and now speak a corrupted version of High Valyrian. The lost civilization of Sarnor. In the central grasslands of Essos, there once lived a race of people called the Sarnori, who referred to themselves as the Tall Men. They were legendary for their height, often standing well over 6 feet tall. They had brown skin and black eyes, and they built a network of magnificent city-states. At their peak, they were one of the most powerful civilizations in the world, with a king who ruled from the city of Sarnath. However, they were almost entirely wiped out during the Century of Blood following the Doom of Valyria. The Dothraki, a nomadic race of horse lords, began to expand across the grasslands. The Sarnori were proud and refused to unite their cities, allowing the Dothraki to destroy them one by one. Today, only one Sarnori city remains, Sarth, and its population has dwindled to just a few thousand people. They are a tragic example of a great race that was lost to history. The unique peoples of the Far East and South. As we move further away from Westeros, the races become even more distinct. In the Golden Empire of Ut, which is inspired by ancient China, the people are said to be incredibly wealthy and technologically advanced. They have bright eyes and skin that is often described as pale gold. Their history is even longer than that of Westeros, with some of their legends claiming their empire has existed for tens of thousands of years. To the south of the known world lies the continent of Sothorios, which is home to the Brindled Men. These are perhaps the most physically distinct humans in the world. They are massive, thick-boned and muscular, with long arms and sloped foreheads. Their skin is thick and patterned with brown and white swirls, similar to a hog's. Interestingly, the lore suggests that they are so genetically different from the humans of Westeros and Essos that they cannot produce fertile offspring with them. They are a hardy race, which is necessary because Sothorios is filled with deadly diseases that kill most foreigners within weeks. Then we have the Ibbenese, who live on the island of Ib in the Shivering Sea. They are described as being short and heavy-set, rarely taller than 5 feet, but with shoulders as broad as a man who is 6 feet tall. They are the hairiest people in the world, covered in thick, dark fur. Their voices are very deep, and they are world-famous as wailers. Geneticists in our world have often compared the description of the Ibbenese to Neanderthals, as they have heavy brow ridges and very dense bones. The mystery of the Deep Ones and Merlings. Finally, we must mention the more mythological races that haunt the edges of the maps. In the Iron Islands and various coastal regions, there are legends of the Deep Ones. These are described as a misshapen race of half-human, half-fish creatures that supposedly sired the ancestors of the Ironborn. While no one has seen a Deep One in thousands of years, there are strange, oily black stone structures found all over the world. From the Seastone Chair to the base of the High Tower in Old Town, that some believe were built by this aquatic race. There are also the Merlings, who are often dismissed as sailors' stories. However, in a world where dragons and ice demons are real, many believe the Merlings exist in the unexplored depths of the Sunset Sea. These legends often overlap with the stories of the Patchface character in the books, who claims to have lived under the sea and seen creatures that behave very differently from humans. Each of these races contributes to the richness of the world. Whether it is the ancient magic of the Children of the Forest, the iron will of the Andals, or the tragic beauty of the Valyrians, the history of this universe is a history of different peoples trying to find their place in a world that is often cold and unforgiving. By understanding where these people came from, we can better understand the conflicts that drive the story we see on screen and in the pages of the books today.